Who was that?
Just one of the skivvies.
Find out which option topped the poll in Hollywood Sports Update after the news.
There's something unusual about a NatWest investment specialist. He'll never sell you a NatWest unit trust. He'll never sell you a NatWest pension. And he'll certainly never sell you NatWest life assurance. Because the NatWest Group like to do things differently, they've decided not to have their own unit trusts, pensions, or life assurance, preferring their investment specialists to be wholly independent. Free to judge over 2,000 products, each on its own merits, guiding you impartially to the one that suits you best. So, for purely independent financial planning, step into NatWest, and they'll call in one of their high flyers.
Wait until you see the first 7-day savings in the Allied Summer Sale.
They'll love this colour or velvet carpet. It's only $5.99 a square yard.
This new Stainmaster carpet's going to be popular.
What fantastic low prices on ready-made curtains. These are only $5.99. A Dorlux drawer divan for under £200. What value?
Look at the saving on this beautiful suite. Amazing.
There's extra savings for the first 7 days in the Allied Summer Sale.
Nice and easy does it at Allied.
This is what happens when you take on too many responsibilities.
Morning, Mr. Inlow.
Morning. And this is what happens when BET helps you to shed them. Day-to-day hassles like office cleaning, drinks dispensers, distribution and warehousing, scaffolding, plumbing, fire alarms and security. In fact, whatever support service you'd like us to take on, from washroom maintenance to air conditioning, you'll find BET will gladly take the load off your shoulders, leaving you on top of the company instead of the company on top of you.
Is that the fact?
BET. Phone us on 0800 010122.
The new Philips televisions. Technology with style. Every summer, thousands of people lose their traveler's checks. This summer, only American Express can deliver their replacements virtually anywhere in the world by hand.
Mr. Stewart?
Your replacement traveller's checks have arrived.
American Express traveller's checks. Why settle for anything less?
What are Kevin and Mark doing away from the street? This week's TV Times puts them through their paces at Brands Hatch to help their driving ambitions. We meet the Brits on the Costa del Sol who are counting the Costa del Living. There's a holiday to India and all the ITV and Channel 4 programmes at your fingertips in TV Times. TV Times.
If you want to be in touch with what's happening around the YTV region, get in touch now with the What's On 24-hour-a-day events guide on 0898 200 175.
On Monday, the rules of engagement become ominously clearer.
Hoey! That's our office!
You said none of this was going to happen. You lied.
I think he's seeing another woman, but I have to know.
The Queen broadcasts at 6. After that.
In Love and War, all's far from fair. Rules of engagement, Monday at 9 on ITV.
An artist fakes his death in a bid to tie up the price of his paintings in Hammer House of Mystery and Suspense at 10:40. But now the time is 10 o'clock, and it's time for the latest news from ITN.
8.3% inflation, but interest rates stay put. Labour win both by-elections and may have won the Euro poll. British Rail asks the High Court to stop the strike. China says there was no massacre in Beijing. And Prince Charles unveils his village of the future. Good evening. The annual rate of inflation has hit a 7-year high of 8.3%. The figure for May, published today, was 0.3% higher than that in April. But with the city expecting worse, the Chancellor was able to avoid a further rise in interest rates, at least for the time being. But there was no relief for the government in yesterday's by-elections. Labour easily held on to Glasgow Central and increased its majority at Vauxhall. And a BBC exit poll predicts sweeping gains for Labour when the European election results are declared on Sunday.
Mrs. Thatcher went about her official duties today, here at Kew Gardens this afternoon, outwardly unruffled and saying nothing about either the by-elections or about the rise in inflation, but neither will have pleased her. Inflation has now risen over the past 6 months from 6.8% in December to a slightly lower than expected 8.3% figure for last month. That helped the Chancellor avoid another interest rate rise today. But with inflation probably not at its peak yet, the Conservatives' fortunes at the ballot box will continue to suffer because of the economy. Indeed, ministers are saying quite openly that they expect some very rough months ahead, but that they intend to tough it out.
Catherine Lilita Hoey has been duly elected to serve as member for the said constituency.
For Labour, though, it's all going splendidly, with Mr. Kinnock's disciplinary crackdown at Vauxhall, where Kate Hoey was the imposed candidate, proving no problem. And with the result at Glasgow Central, where having stopped the Scottish nationalists in their tracks added to Mr. Kinnock's happiness.
Well, the news overnight is very good. The news this morning about inflation is very bad. We're pleased about our election results, but frankly, this speed of movement upward of inflation is bound to take a little bit of the sting out for everyone.
Of course, Neil Kinnock is hoping for great things from the European election results too during Sunday night. Though he's a bit wary of the BBC exit poll, which suggests Labour will get 44% of the vote, the Tories 32% and the Greens 14%, well ahead of the Democrats at 6%. If true, it would all mean the present balance of 45 Conservative MEPs and 32 Labour would become by 51 to 26 a Labour majority among the British members at Strasbourg. But there'd still be no Green MPs, despite the quite clear indications that for the first time they've begun to make a clear impact in the pattern of voting in this country.
It's certainly going to make the other parties really look very closely at why the Greens are getting votes. What is it they're not doing to attract the people that are now voting for us?
Most bruised by the Greens' rise have been the Democrats, more heart-searching ahead for them, no doubt. They don't even have the excuse that the suffering Tories give for their problems, that it's all because they're tackling inflation.
Well, interest rates and mortgage rate increases are always very unpopular politically. I think we're hitting some of the things that normally happen to a government in mid-term. But the important thing is actually to make the right decisions and to get the policy right and to get the economy right. And I'm confident we're doing that.
So can the Conservatives' political fortunes revive? Well, ministers believe that as inflation goes down, and they say that it will, their political stock will rise again. Though two senior ministers have told me in the past week that they believe Mrs. Thatcher may have to go a full 5-year term and wait until 1992 before calling an election. But Mr. Kinnock believes that the economic problems are now so serious that the Conservatives have left it too late. Michael Brunson, News at 10, Westminster.
And there'll be a special ITN programme on the results of the European elections. That's on ITV on Sunday night.
Despite the rise in inflation, the pound had a better day on the foreign exchanges. It closed at $1.5340, that's up 1.6 cents. But it was another hectic day for the men in the city whose activities dictate the value of the pound.
It was a big day for the currency markets and a big day for Nick Probert. He left his Hertfordshire home at the crack of dawn, bound for the city. At 26, he's already one of the leading foreign exchange dealers at Barclays. He saw from his portable screen that the pound had moved up sharply overnight. He'd need to find out why. Nick Probert works a 12-hour day but can earn £60,000 a year with bonuses. He buys and sells sterling to make profit for his bank, so the morning papers are required reading. Into the office, and Nick Probert was catching up with news from Tokyo while grabbing a hasty breakfast. By 8:30, the dealing room was buzzing, the pound was falling. But Probert was making profit on his deals, £10,000 so far.
As expected.
At 11:30, the inflation figure was out. It's better than expected and the market is calmer. But Probert has sold pounds too early, and by 12:15, he's £150,000 down. No time to go out for lunch. Nick Probert was battling to get back in the black. But by 5 o'clock, a relieved Probert was all square again. He traded £1.5 billion in the day. Again, he and his colleagues have failed to force a rise in interest rates.
Some of the market mentality is such that they act like a pack of wolves sensing blood.
And do you think that's going to continue?
I think there's a good possibility that it will continue until there is some fundamental change.
And the pack of dealers may decide to carry on selling sterling next week.
British Rail will go to the High Court on Monday to try to stop the National Union of Railwomen going on strike on Wednesday. BR claim hundreds of union members did not receive strike ballots. The union immediately broke off negotiations. They say British Rail's conduct is shameful and deceitful.
British Rail say they've had hundreds of complaints from employees who weren't balloted before being called out on strike. Less than half the 75,000 workforce backed the strike call. Nearly a third didn't vote at all. BR rejected the union's claims that they'd set up talks at ACAS under false pretences.
Having got this information this morning, it would have been irresponsible of the board not to try and protect its business. We've got 2 million people a day using our services, and they would have been seriously inconvenienced next Wednesday by the strike. So we must try and get it called off.
I think that to invite us to ACAS for conciliation talks, whilst at the same time planning a High Court approach, to me, demeans the conciliation process in a way that I never thought possible.
It's the latest in a series of court moves to squash industrial action. Last month, tube drivers held a strike ballot which was declared unlawful because it contained too much information. A proposed dock strike was stopped by the courts for not containing enough information. Now British Rail want the NUR's ballot declared void. They say some people didn't get a copy. Employment law has become increasingly complex for trades unions. Voting must be without interference or constraint. Ballots containing unclear or indirect questions may be illegal, and they must warn workers if they strike they may be in breach of contract. BR's case will be heard at the High Court on Monday, and both sides are taking legal advice over the weekend.
3 Iranians are being expelled from Britain for activities which are said to threaten national security. They are 2 students and a businessman based in London, and they've been given 10 days to get out.
The Iranians, their once busy London embassy, now looked after by Pakistan, say they've received no official confirmation of the expulsions. They come at a time when Anglo-Iranian relations are at a low point. That low point caused by the Ayatollah Khomeini's decree that British author Salman Rushdie should be executed. That led to rumours that Islamic hit squads were either on their way to Britain or already here. Well, today the Home Office announced that 3 Iranians were being expelled. In a statement it said their deportation would be conducive to the public good, adding, these 3 Iranians have been personally involved in activities which constitute a threat to the security of this country. It's not the first time this year Iranians have been thrown out of Britain. 3 months ago, 17 people left Heathrow for Tehran, all asked to leave on grounds of national security. The Home Office has told the latest 3 people to be expelled that they must be out of the country within 10 days. If they were plotting against Salman Rushdie, and no details of their activities are available, it'll be further proof that even after the Ayatollah's death, the author in hiding isn't safe.
Military leaders in Beijing have taken Western journalists to Tiananmen Square and told them there was no massacre of students there. They admitted for the first time that troops did fire on protesters and said 300 people died in fighting in Beijing, but most were soldiers. Western reports say around 3,000 people were killed, most of them civilians. Our Asia correspondent, Jeremy Thompson, who's been in Beijing for 6 weeks, was among the journalists taken to Tiananmen Square.
2 weeks ago, Tiananmen Square was filled with cries for freedom. Today, this vast empty expanse echoed with the stamp of repression. It's been sealed to everyone but the army since the killings. Today, they made an exception. Under martial law, foreign correspondents have been harassed, arrested, and expelled for trying to report the truth. Today, we were invited into the Great Hall of the People to meet the men who ordered that treatment. An array of army top brass warmly welcomed us, then immediately accused the foreign media of distorting the facts.
During the process of clearing up the Tiananmen Square, I can say that we never beaten up to death of a student or a young man on spot. There is no such a thing as the bloodshed on the Tiananmen Square.
At first, Colonel Lee claimed the troops had only fired into the air to teach people a lesson. But as it became obvious that most correspondents had witnessed the events of June the 4th, Colonel Lee altered his story, admitting that soldiers had shot directly at Beijing citizens. According to the colonel, it was all a misunderstanding. At first, the citizens of Beijing simply hadn't realized that the army had come to protect them from a small band of counter-revolutionary thugs. It had taken an hour and a half to trot out the party line. No correspondent was convinced. Then, with Colonel Lee acting as our guide, we were led out on the official Tiananmen tour. The army officer, determined to prove there'd been no killing on the square itself, he failed to mention the slaughter in the side streets. 12 days ago, the soldiers had come with tanks. Today, they came with turf, replacing the gardens trampled and burned during the last moments of the student protest. They were cleaning up the square, scraping away the past and sanitizing history. Though this regime may be able to tidy up the physical scars, they'll find it hard to erase the hopes of a disenchanted people. Today, this communist regime would have me believe that it was all a mirage, denying everything that I had seen with my own eyes. Jeremy Thompson, News at 10 on Tiananmen Square, Beijing.
2 ITN staff members have been told to leave China within 24 hours. Reporter Vernon Mann and cameraman John Elphinstone were arrested on Wednesday in the town of Chengdu. The Chinese said they'd broken martial law regulations.
Thousands of Hungarians have filled the streets of Budapest to pay a final tribute to the man who led the 1956 uprising. After the rebellion, Imre Nagy, then the Prime Minister, and 4 of his colleagues were executed for treason and buried in an unmarked grave. Today they were reburied as political martyrs.
250,000 people filled Heroes Square in Budapest, the biggest crowd here since the 1950s. This day will go down in Hungary's history, when the conscience and courage of a nation proved stronger than political ideology. This country's communist leaders, seeing the wind of change in Moscow, now admit the show trial and execution of Imre Nagy 30 years ago was a national disgrace. Standing in symbolic reconciliation today, Hungary's Prime Minister Németh. Among the veterans of the uprising to pay tribute, this group from Britain.
I'm glad to be here to witness, you know, after 30 years, actually the fall of that awful regime.
This veteran said all Russian troops must now leave Hungary. Imre Nagy was a communist, but he wanted multi-party democracy for Hungary and a break with the Warsaw Pact. That was heresy 30 years ago, and he paid for it with his life. But Nagy's ideal is mirrored in the political reforms now sweeping Hungary. His surviving daughter is a symbol of the personal suffering this struggle has cost. This entire day was a landmark in the history of communist Europe. For Hungary not only buried Imre Nagy, but the Stalinist model of communism he fought against. Tonight, hours after Imre Nagy was laid to rest, they still sang Hungary's anthem in his honor. Ian Glover-James, News at 10 in Budapest.
The Prince of Wales, scourge of thoughtless architects and irresponsible developers, has unveiled plans for the villages he intends to build in Dorset. In an exclusive interview, he describes his vision of the communities of the future. A special report in Part 2. Plus, how Western doctors are helping the victims of Russia's train tragedy. And a £1,000 fine for the man who sent rattlesnakes through the post. That's in a couple of minutes.
Anytime you choose, kick off your shoes, rest your weary eyes, or catch up with the news. Our favorite book will be our perfect company, so relax. Forget about the blues, you're doing fine. Leave your cares and worries fine. Loosen up your tie, watch the world speed by. Relax.
Every summer, thousands of people lose their traveller's checks. This summer, only American Express can deliver their replacements virtually anywhere in the world by hand.
Mrs. Stewart, your replacement traveller's checks have arrived.
American Express traveller's checks. Why settle for anything less?
£100,000 to be shared out in the Roundtree's Fruit Jackpot competition. Look for details on Fruit Pastels, Tutti Fruities, Polo Fruits, Jelly Tots and Fruit Gums. You could be one of over 1,000 lucky winners in the Roundtree's Fruit Jackpot competition.
Trusted with another man's savings is not to be taken lightly. For it is not just coins or pieces of paper he is asking you to insure, but his very sweat and toil. It is perhaps because we think like this that more and more people's savings are now growing with us. The Royal Bank of Scotland, where people matter.
The Prince of Wales has told children in Dorset he wants to see a world in which people can walk to work. He says a less energy-consuming world is the only long-term solution to the globe's environmental problems. And as part of his crusade for a better Britain, he's commissioned a series of villages for Duchy of Cornwall land in Dorset. They are partly modelled on towns in Tuscany.
To the west of Dorchester, on 450 acres of agricultural land, is where the Prince of Wales plans to build urban villages in which he hopes people will want to live and work. Dorchester needs more housing. Outline planning permission for the first phase has already been granted. The rugby club is currently being built. But as the model shows, within 10 years, the area will have been transformed into a self-contained village with its own shops, schools, offices and recreation facilities. The clock tower and the central square form the heart of the village, with roads radiating out from the centre. No building is over 3 stories high and everything is in walking distance. This is the market, this the library. Early designs show the kind of classic architecture which Prince Charles loves, though some say it's more like Italy than Dorset. Leon Creer designed the master plan. He accompanied the Prince of Wales when he made a surprise visit to Dorchester today. Prince Charles wants local people fully involved.
But it seems to me the important thing is to be able to have houses that are at affordable rents.
Yeah.
Whether they're called council houses or they're available from housing associations or whatever. I mean, that seems to me is how to ensure that those houses go on being available and aren't just sold on.
Over the weekend, the people are being asked what they want.
It'll be interesting to see what the result is.
What if the people don't like what they see?
I knew you were going to ask that.
What's the answer?
No, I know. Well, I mean, I think at the moment, as far as I can make out, there's a considerable amount of goodwill about the ideas that they've already heard. I mean, obviously they won't like some things, but I think that half the battle of this sort of exercise is that it's not only participatory and consultative, but it's also educative, because one of the things I feel is that we've got so used over the last 40 or 50 years to looking at planning and building and design, local and urban design, in one particular way. Like you only build housing estates, which always have cul-de-sacs. The point I feel we ought to re-examine again is how to design on a traditional basis again. I mean, none of these towns and villages that we all love in different parts of the world and here were designed without some kind of a code or some kind of feeling for urban design and layout. The local authority are very keen to have more land available for more housing for people on lower incomes. So, I mean, instead of just sitting there saying, no, you can't have it, I mean, what I wanted to try and see was a development, if it had to be, along more civilized lines, to show that it's possible to have a development on different principles to what we've been brought up to believe in the last 40 years.
Joan Thurkettle, News at 10, Dorchester.
The Russians admitted today what Western scientists have long suspected, that one of their atomic plants suffered a big accidental explosion 30 years ago. It happened in September 1957 at Kazly, 60 miles north of the city of Chelyabinsk in the Ural Mountains. Today's report says 10,000 people were evacuated and the land is still contaminated. Meanwhile, British specialists have been helping to treat the hundreds who were burnt in last week's gas explosion on the Trans-Siberian Railway.
At the site of the accident in the Ural Mountains, relatives have visited the wreckage of the trains in which so many died. Some taking away small reminders of the tragedy. Unofficially, doctors have said the death toll is over 1,000. For those who got out of the inferno alive, after 12 days in hospital, the battle for recovery is just beginning. But the patients are being helped by a unique and largely unpublicized gathering of burn specialists from around the world. Here in Moscow, American doctors working with their Soviet colleagues.
Okay. Now this patient did not get steroids, corticosteroids.
Although language is a problem, they're all pooling their expertise to help the injured. The working conditions are difficult and Soviet facilities less sophisticated, but Western surgeons say there's been a good professional relationship. Dozens of the worst burnt are children, many of whom were on their way to holiday camps.
It's in burns units like this that for the first time since the Armenian earthquake, foreign specialists are working side by side with Soviet doctors. Britain too is playing its part.
One of those British specialists is John Settle, who worked among the injured at the Bradford Stadium fire. He's just returned from the disaster zone.
Of course I found it daunting. I've worked in burns for 25 years. But it's a massive problem to deal with hundreds and hundreds of burn patients. I think that the Soviet doctors and nurses have responded remarkably well. they knew how to look after burn patients, and we felt quite privileged to be able to help them to do that.
Some patients in the wards have made excellent progress. Olga, a cook from Siberia, is being released next week, much earlier than first expected. And 10-year-old Yulia, whose legs were badly burnt, is now able to enjoy life again. Robert Moore, News at 10, Moscow.
The Irish Prime Minister Charles Hoey appears to be heading for a major upset in the Republic's elections. The latest predictions suggest he'll win the biggest number of seats, but still fail to get the overall majority he'd hoped for when he called the election. As the counting continues, the opposition Fine Gael and the Labour and Workers' parties are all thought to have increased their votes.
The voting over, the Irish electorate settled back today to watch their verdict taking shape, while Dublin turned the clock back to celebrate its native author, James Joyce. But inside the counting halls, a change in political key was spotted by the party's tallymen. A move towards the left looks set to rob Charles Hockey of his goal of a majority government.
A lot of counting to be done yet. Oh, we're still on course, I think. Which way is it? This way over.
The political direction is indeed confused tonight, but there's a clear realignment on the left.
There has been a fairly strong backlash to the Thatcherite-type policies that Mr. Hockey has been implementing.
There was a surge for Labour, and if we head up around the 16 seats, it would be a great victory for the Labour Party, and perhaps we can start looking for that realignment between left and right that we've been talking about.
Tonight's biggest losers seem to be the Progressive Democrats. Calculations show they were damaged by their electoral pact with Fine Gael.
It seems that the conditions of this election didn't suit the Progressive Democrats, and I regret that from their point of view. They suited me, however. I'll have gained more seats in this election than any other party. Mr. Hoy's gamble just hasn't worked out. It was badly judged, badly timed.
The latest computer predictions here in Dublin in the last half hour show that Charles Hockey could fall 5 seats short of that crucial 83 he needs to form a majority government in the Dáil. That leaves a question mark over his political future and leaves the country in the middle of a constitutional crisis. David Chater, News at 10 in Dublin.
Here, a reptile collector has been fined £1,000 and ordered to pay £1,500 in costs for illegally importing lizards and snakes through the post. Southampton Crown Court heard that Peter Cook had sent himself 3 Gila monsters. Another parcel contained 5 blue-tongued skinks and 7 rattlesnakes. He was caught after one parcel was discovered at a London sorting office.
It was the discovery of this poisonous Gila monster lizard which alerted customs officers. They found the foot-long reptile stuffed inside a sock in a brown paper parcel in a London sorting office.
We have officers at postal depots who routinely examine incoming mails for all sorts of illegal contraband. And now and again the unusual happens, as it did on this occasion, when the parcel actually physically moved.
What do you advise your officers to do in those circumstances?
Well, it's tempting to say run like hell.
Other parcels were found. 4 contained North American rattlesnakes, whose venomous bite can kill. And when customs officers traced the sender of the parcels and raided his house near Southampton, they found a bedroom containing more than 60 snakes and lizards. They all belonged to reptile collector Peter Cook, a 23-year-old medical equipment salesman. In court today, Cook admitted 8 charges of illegally importing and keeping the reptiles. But Judge Stuart Bates said he accepted that he hadn't done so for financial gain. He described Cook as an obsessional and misguided hobbyist who'd simply gone too far. Cook was driven quickly from the court, crouched on the back seat of a car. His reptiles, though, are likely to have a more comfortable journey home. The Customs Office now plan to repatriate some of them to their native North America. Harry Smith, News at 10, Southampton.
The remains of the Rose Theatre site in London have been covered with a protective layer of sand following the decision not to have it designated as an ancient monument. The site developers said the remains need protection against the weather. Sand was sprayed over plastic sheeting, ready for a thin layer of concrete. Campaigners say the site's being damaged. And finally, Cliff Richard has just finished celebrating 30 years in rock with his biggest concert yet. Tonight's event, enjoyed by more than 70,000 fans at Wembley Stadium, also saw the reunion of one of the most enduring and successful combos of all time, Cliff and the Shadows. And he's still as he was back in 1962.
Just time to remind you of a special ITN programme on the Queen's Birthday Honours List. That's after midnight on ITV. And that's the news at 10 from Trevor and me. A very good night to you.
Good evening. Well, if the farmers and gardeners that are desperate for some rain will forgive my smile, it's going to be a glorious weekend for the rest of us. Lots of sunshine to come. There's been cloud around today. You can see how it's been moving across Britain, southwards and eastwards during the evening. Bands of cloud, but they're very thin enough to let the sun shine through, in fact. If anywhere the cloud's been thick enough for rain, well, it's been up in the northwestern parts of Scotland there. Just the Western Isles seeing a little bit of drizzly rain from time to time today. That's dying out now, so a fine, generally dry night to come. A mild night, though, probably too mild in the southeast, with temperatures 12 or above everywhere. On to tomorrow now. Well, lots of sunshine to come, as I suggested. I think the best of the sunshine tomorrow, again, will be in the west and the southwest there, where you'll have hardly any cloud at all. The southeastern parts of Britain, perhaps seeing some low cloud to begin with in the southeastern corner there, but that should soon go. Northwestern parts of Scotland will see quite a lot of cloud again tomorrow, but once again, if there's any rain at all, it's only likely to be over the Western Isles, and once again, it'll be light and drizzly, so most of Scotland dry and bright. Sunday, well, it could be one of those rare days where absolutely everywhere in Britain is dry. Certainly be a lot of sunshine around. Again, the northwest, a bit of cloud from time to time, but the south and west seeing glorious sunshine. And here's the temperatures for the weekend. A hot weekend for most of us, almost everybody into the 70s. 27 there is way up into the top of the 70s, almost into the 80s, in fact. 21 in the extreme north, that's 70, so everywhere very warm and light winds. Let's have a quick look around Europe now to see how things are shaping up. Well, we're up there with the best of them. Not many places that much warmer than us. Mind you, central parts of Spain, if you're touring around in Spain there, it's downright hot, to be honest. 35 there. That could be up into the 90s, 95. One or two places a bit cooler over in Eastern Europe there, only just into the 20s. But apart from that, all the traditional resorts around the Mediterranean, very warm and sunny right through the next few days. And I think that counts for Britain as well. I'll leave you with a summary of tomorrow's weather.
Good evening. A murder inquiry has been launched tonight after a man was stabbed in the Leeds pub. The incident happened in the Nag's Head in Vicar Lane at about 5:15. The man, who's 34, has not yet been named, died later in hospital. Detectives are still at the scene interviewing staff and customers who were in the pub at the time of the stabbing, and a man's now helping with their inquiries. 18 families had to be evacuated when a fire ripped through a block of flats in Rotherham tonight. More than 30 firemen were needed to bring the fire under control at the complex in Hounsfield Road in East Herringthorpe. Nobody was hurt, but residents of 12 of the flats have had to be rehoused because their homes were badly damaged. The fire started in one of the top flats and quickly spread to others in the block. It's believed it was caused by a faulty electrical appliance. The Sinn Féin leader Gerry Adams has accepted an invitation to visit Sheffield this weekend. Mr Adams, who's frequently been criticised for refusing to condemn the activities of the IRA, is expected to take part in a conference on the future of socialism, organised by a number of leading left-wing politicians, including Tony Benn, the Labour MP for Chesterfield. A 10-year-old boy is undergoing surgery at Hull Royal Infirmary this evening after tripping over and impaling himself on a metal rod. He was walking in the Marfleet Road area of Hull when he fell on top of the quarter-inch rod, which was sticking more than 3 feet out of a piece of reinforced concrete. The rod pierced the boy's neck and he had to be freed by a fireman. But at this stage it's thought he won't suffer permanent damage. Police at Withensea are investigating an attack by a Rottweiler dog on a 4-year-old boy. George Bysher was playing with friends near his home in Rycroft Drive in Withensea when the tethered dog broke free and bit him. The attack on his left leg left him with 2 small punctures which needed hospital treatment. The ship which wrote a new chapter in nautical history by discovering the wreck of the battleship Bismarck arrived home in Hull today. The Star Hercules, a survey ship which normally works for the oil industry, was chartered from the Humberside-based Mar Company by oceanographer Robert Ballard, the man who also discovered the wreck of the Titanic. Ian Cundall reports.
Daybreak on Hull docks and the end of a modern voyage of discovery. It's 2 months since the survey ship Star Hercules sailed from Humberside in search of the Bismarck. Today she returned, having unlocked a lost chapter of naval history. For her crew, the moment of triumph came when TV cameras on their mini-submarine picked up the battleship's bridge.
We were towing our vehicle behind us over a predetermined pattern, and as we were going across this particular last section of the search of that particular leg, just out of the blue, it came there. We weren't expecting to see it at all. In fact, all the information before led us to believe it might be somewhere else, and just out of the blue it came up.
That's the news tonight. Join us again tomorrow lunchtime. Now the weather from Maggie Mash.
Tonight will stay dry and warm with temperatures around 12 degrees centigrade, 54 degrees Fahrenheit. A few mist patches are likely for a time around dawn, but these won't last long. Tomorrow will be another dry and very warm day for all parts of the region, with well-broken cloud, which will allow some good spells of sunshine. Temperatures will be as high as 27 degrees centigrade in the afternoon, that's 81 degrees Fahrenheit, and winds will be very light. And the winning option is, it'll be after the break.
There's a new reduced fat spread that can bring a lighter touch to all your cooking, baking and spreading. New Light Blend from Stork.
Panasonic have taken two hi-fi speakers this size and put them into a television this size, ready for NICAM digital stereo broadcasting. Result, television with astonishing sound quality. The remarkable picture quality is thanks to Panasonic's advanced tube technology.